So Matthew and Jonathan, we're missing Albert. He'll sneak in. So hello, welcome to In-App Messaging, Push, Retain, Repeat. I'm excited to be here this afternoon with these two gentlemen. It's an exciting topic, and I look forward to diving right into it. I'm going to ask both of you to introduce yourself and a little bit about what you do and what you're currently working on.
Sure. Matt Kassan. I'm the Director of CRM and Retention Marketing at Discovery Inc., subsidiary GolfTV. And I currently work on, so GolfTV, Discovery bought PGA golf rights internationally for streaming. So we have a sports streaming service, which people were talking about sports streaming earlier. It's an OTT service. So I lead retention, so it's really focused on email, push notifications, surveys, and other things just to generate customer loyalty. I've worked at Google and Barnes & Noble and Nintendo before this.
Nice.
Right. My name is John Ofri, so I am with Verizon. My team heads up digital engagement and communications. So I'm a Verizon long-timer, been there for 14 years. Been an incredible journey though. So right now my current role is ensuring that we're delivering the right message to the right customer at the right time via the right communication channel, but also looking at how we can integrate the digital experience into all of the different channels of Verizon and ensure that digital is a core part of the Verizon customer journey. So, that really comes down to making the customer experience easier and more simple via the digital app, the digital website, et cetera.
So I worked on Verizon for a couple of years at RGA, so I'm sure we cross paths.
Quite possible.
So it's obvious that your responsibilities are greater than just notification strategies. Can you tell us how important this particular channel is within your broader CRM strategies?
Sure. So, it's interesting coming from Verizon. We're in a very unique place where we have very intimate knowledge of our customers, right? We know every single customer's mobile phone number. And a lot of people might say, well, then, why even bother with push notifications, right? I mean, every customer's phone number. You just send them text message. Well, it's interesting. We actually subscribe to that thought over the past 5-6 years, but recently we've started to investigate exactly how powerful push is as part of the broader CRM strategy. And for example, we have different transactional communications that we would send out around customer billing, customer plan and data usage, and that was traditionally sent via text message. Well, over the past year, we actually transitioned that communication from text to push to understand exactly what the impact on customer engagement would be with the app. And I have to say, it was absolutely phenomenal. So we saw double the click rate on push over almost identical text message. And our key measure for app engagement, we will look at monthly app active accounts, went from under 40% to over 50%. And just to put that in perspective, our goal for the next 2 to 3 years was to hit 50%. We actually hit that number over the course of 4 months just by transitioning from text to push.
That's impressive.
Very. So at GolfTV, it's interesting with push notifications. So it's really another channel to extend your reach and frequency to drive customers to engage with your product, especially for us where we have registrants, people who have come to check you out and not necessarily started paying you yet, and subscribers. So with push notifications, also being a predominantly outside the US company where email opt-in by default is often defaulted to off, so your email opt-in rates are quite lower than in the US. So what push notification channels really helps with is extending that reach to customers who you otherwise would not be able to reach via email. We actually have a fair amount of our customer base that's only reachable via direct-to-consumer messaging via push. But even beyond that is also what is the content? Why do customers want to use your product? With a sports streaming service, think of a sport team or an app you might have. You know, I'm a Yankee fan. I want to when I receive a notification that the Yankee game just started. That's how you know what to watch and when content is available. And so push is really important for us to bring customers. Push is important to pull customers back into the app at the timeliness of why they want to use your app.
Yeah. Yeah, and then I'm going to skip a few questions because it's kind of what you're talking about now. But so being only relevant is kind of yesterday, right? Just to know my name or something is a little bit yesterday. So what users are looking, or what I think they're looking for, is real value. So what campaigns or what strategies have you put into place that actually, and even the value is beyond transactional, and like you were talking about giving you information about the game. I think Delta gives it to me when they're telling me that the gate has changed or the time of my flight has changed. But are you seeing that your consumers are looking for more than just a little bit of personalization, like real value beyond transaction?
I think customers are really looking for the app to deliver on its promise of what they're using it for. So I think the Delta example is great, incredible, right? I mean, these days you're at a gate and the gate changes and they tell you where to go to. Or if your flight is delayed, you can go to the airport later than you wanted to. You hear that through push. So important. I think for news organizations, push notifications, I mean, think of all the news over the past few days. Where did you hear it? You probably heard it first through a push notification from one of your news apps. And for us, starting with when I first looked at push, like what do we need to do? We need to let people know when our live streams start. Yeah. That's the very first thing that we needed to do, and that's what we focused on first. And then beyond that, then it becomes more of a storytelling that where we're trying to get to now is beyond the what's available, what time are things happening, what's the story. I think that's next for us to conquer. That requires more editorial work and more resources.
Yeah, Matt, and I think you really hit the nail on the head there. So the way that I think of it, right, there's really three big barometers you can look at just to see, how valuable is your communication going to be. And the first is, of course, is it compatible and congruent with the core purpose of your digital experience, your application, right? And then the second thing I would say is, does it anticipate or speak to a customer need or pain point? You look at like the Delta gate change. Well, now I'm stressed. I hear that, my flight now has a new gate. I didn't hear what that gate was. Well, good thing I just saw a push that says, okay, well, your gate is now 75. Good news is I don't even need to open my app, right? I know immediately what the next step for me is going to be. And now the amount of stress relief I have just via that one communication is immense. And that then speaks to the third thing, which is timeliness. And I think this is an absolutely important factor when you're looking at push, which is there must be critical timeliness to the message. And if that's the case, then you're going to see that that's valuable. However, if you ask yourself, this push notification, do I care when it goes out? And if the answer is, I really don't care, that's probably a little bit of a red flag that maybe this isn't super valuable for the customer either.
So related to that, so this panel is positively named Push, Retain, Repeat, right? But we know that there are a lot of times where messages are missed or ignored. So I was wondering, do you have any tested, tried and true test and learn strategies that you've put into place, like that you're constantly measuring? Do you have any stories about something that was unsuccessful in which you measured and then you put something in place that you could talk to us about?
Yeah, so it's interesting. So for my own digital organization, the big hot topic right now is optimizations, right? And we put this huge value on core experience optimization and multivariate testing. And we ourselves have taken our optimization practices from 10 iterations per month. I think now we're at like 45,000 iterations per month just by implementing AI-driven optimizations. But the thing is, you can take those same concepts and you can actually move them over to communications as well. So one example is when we first started our push practice, we would send a push notification to our customer base around a promotion for a device. And, not surprisingly, sending a broad message to a large base without a lot of personalization resulted in very low click rate. And even more distressingly, it resulted in very high opt-out from push in general from our app. And for the folks who know push, that's, one of the biggest problems with sending a bad push is customers will just opt out of push entirely, and then guess what? You can't reach them anymore via that channel. So, what we did was we said, okay, let's understand a little bit more about when we should be driving this promotion, to whom we should be driving it, and then let's start implementing this communication along different parts in the customer's bill cycle to understand when they are most relevant to them, tweaking the message in a number of different ways, even using different tool sets just to ensure that we're using the full breadth of our abilities to understand exactly, what is the right channel and when is the right time to send the message, and then what is the right communication for each customer segment. And then by going through a number of those different tests, we, combine all those different dimensions to figure out what is the best way to send that one communication. And then for future iterations of similar promos, we then doubled the click rate of those promotions. And actually, more importantly, we made the opt-out of push entirely almost negligible.
Very impressive.
Yeah, I think for us, really for every push campaign, I'm always looking to try to find something to A/B test to continue the learning curve every single week or campaign. So, for example, currently testing the use of emojis versus no emojis, or the length, the character count in notifications, or trying to get to the point of being able to use rich media in our notifications. We're still setting up some of our own technology as far as notifications. As far as also testing and trying to understand what can work, I really like using email as a testing ground also. I feel it's a little less drastic. In email, you can try different things and see what works, and maybe have less of a consequence than someone maybe uninstalling the app because of they're not satisfied with the notifications, or they feel it's bothersome. So I've been able to use email and try different uses of recommendation engines and personalization, find what works in email, and then takes that into the push channel and test that and see if that also works.
So we're going to pause a minute and welcome our latest panelists. Do you want to, we'll rewind a little bit and just tell us your name, a little bit about what you're doing and things you're working on.
Sure, absolutely. So Albert Thompson, sorry, a little loud. First of all, apologies for jumping in late. So I'm the Managing Director of Digital at Walton Isaacson, full service agency. So we've, probably been in the mobile space doing a decent amount of multicultural, I'd say, for well over a decade since, I guess, the agency has been in existence. So, a lot of our focus has really been around the audience learning and understanding, just because we have specific segments that we speak to. So part of what I hope is just to give some context to some of the dynamics that we've had to sort of manage over the course of the years for our clients that have made the sort of the in-app space unique for us to really understand and dissect and sort of break down.
Thank you. So we've been talking obviously a lot, and I'm sure everything you just said, you're going to flow right on in. But the next question is, so when you think about any notification strategy, what comes to mind probably first is technology and data, but particularly me being from the creative side of things, and you spoke a little bit about like when you're testing emojis or when you're testing different things, what role do you think creative, and I guess creative can be defined in every way, any way you want it to be defined, what role does creative play in any kind of notification strategy beyond really data technology and, of course, some copy?
Yeah, I guess from our perspective, that aspect of consumer engagement has not changed. If the creative sucks, the campaign will kind of as well. So, while there's certain things in the mobile space that aren't as sexy and as dramatic, I think there still has to be a certain level of diligence putting around messaging, understand your consumer in context. It's very different from when somebody's outside the storefront to when they're starting to move down the aisle, to when they're actually considering looking at something, a hand cling, and dropping something into a basket. I think you have to walk through the journey literally to say, is that something a consumer would or would not do? And I think a lot of things in mobile is, that's not a behavior. Like, nobody's gonna do that. So I think you start there. You have to kind of establish your own rules of engagement or understanding, and then get to the type of messaging points that would essentially work and get people to pull the trigger. I think you have to do enough A/B testing to learn, is it offer-driven, message-driven, time-driven? Is it product bundling-driven? So I think there's a lot of diligence there that'll make the approach to creative a lot more refined versus just a scatter shot of we're just doing stuff.
Yep. Yep. Does anyone else want to comment on creativity?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, that's where also Push is a little interesting, because in the creative, in the upfront consumer-facing creative, it's mostly copy, right? I mean, there are rich push, and you can add images, or you know, bullet points or different icons and emojis. So there's some of that. There's much less opportunity to try different creatives than in email. But that being said, I think A/B testing is paramount with the different tools at your disposal, whether it's copy or whether it's the layout of, you know, with bullet points and different things that you can do to extend the size of a notification. Finding the right approach that works for your customers is, you know, it will lead to the success of your notification strategy.
Yeah.
Yeah, so two things that I kind of think about when I think of just creatively executed push notifications. So the first is I've seen some interesting examples where the company's actually integrated the action into the push itself. So if this is a use case where I don't actually need to drive the customer into the core app experience, and I could just take action, I can like whatever the content is, or maybe you can even you know, activate, I don't know, paperless billing or something just with a tap of a button, you know, that is huge. That's hugely impactful, because now I'm not really detracting from the customer's day or attention. And, you know, guess what? I can even follow up with another push notification as confirmation that, you know, that action successfully took place. But then when I look at like overall creativity and what would really be a driver for that, I think of combining some aspect of like a physical layer, whether it's your geolocation or like an interesting experience like a product trial or like an AR experience, and then combining that with a data-driven personalization layer that speaks to the customer, which then will add that personal touch to the experience itself and make it feel very relevant and cater to, you know, that particular customer, and they'll value it more.
Also, I would just say that too. I know this is mostly about push, but I view in-app messaging as part of most people, at least I think many marketers who work on push notifications are also working on in-app messaging in their app, like a similar responsibility. In-app messaging is very email-like. You are taking, providing, you know, HTML experience inside the app that users can click on and engage in, and I think that's really where the creative messaging design can play a huge role. Even the size of the messaging that you choose. Is it a full page takeover or a pop-up from the bottom or a drop down from the top? What does it look like?
Yep.
I think there's much more creative impact in in-app messaging.
Yep, absolutely. And you, someone mentioned this, but what do you think that any sort of notification strategy, or how have you used it to drive from the digital into the physical? And I don't know if Verizon, maybe this is mostly related to, but like to drive someone in store.
Yeah, so you know, it's interesting. We do look. In fact, my team looks at cross-channel engagement. So that is very much from, let's say, the retail channel, the care channel, into digital, and then from digital, you know, back into retail and care, and whether the customer is, you know, utilizing the app or calling care or walking into a store, how we present the digital experience and integrate into that customer journey is extremely important. So, you know, I think one interesting example is, you know, we have a challenge where customers call care to complete relatively simple transactions, right? And it's due to a lack of awareness that they can often do that within the digital experience. So what the tool we gave to our reps is the ability to actually drive a push notification to the customer that they're talking to, which will actually lead them into the digital experience, to the relevant page that they're covering, and the rep can actually, using co-browse functionality, walk the customer through that experience. So now, the customer now knows how to fish, and the next time they need to, whatever it is, change their plan, they can think, wait, the app can do that. I don't need to sit on hold for 10 minutes again.
Yeah, definitely.
Coming from previously working at a Barnes & Noble, so a retailer, where there's an app. Actually worked more on the Nook app than the Barnes & Noble app, but still sending out coupons that are often redeemable both in-store and online, but using your app to send that out. You have someone who, of course, they can just buy in the app or consider a digital purchase, but it plants a seed in their head that, maybe this weekend I'll stop by the store and I have this coupon that I can use. They're seeing it in the push, or maybe they're seeing it in both email and push, and the frequency of seeing it in both places helps propel that purchase decision.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I would say that we've looked at it, a lot of because of the business challenge we've had to, we've looked at a certain type of app behavior that noted the strongest level of intent to come downstream digitally, obviously, for our clients, and then targeted them through other apps, actually. Just because some of those apps, either we didn't have provisions to actually buy in them, but we knew that they were key trigger points, and then we would go target them essentially in-app. So it's kind of like looking at their, call it mobile app journey, the way you would look at, desktop journey. The other thing we've done is had to key in a lot of in-store targeting in terms of, they call moments. And so I think when Google started breaking down this whole notion of micro moments, it's like, oh my God, here we go. Like what kind of targeting strategy we have to have for that now? I mean, if there are that many instances, so starting to look at targeting point of origin, and then essentially as soon as they hit the store, see if the two tether together. Are they separate? Does it, universally, you need to start here, point of origin, then hit them at retail? Can you do it absent that? And start to look at to what degree that physical path sort of mattered or didn't matter, whether it starts in digital, ends up physical, or vice versa. So start to look at a lot of the behaviors around what's sort of the norms of what people are doing, or is everyone kind of doing a little bit of everything?
Right. And since we're collecting so much information about everyone, obviously, have you seen any sort of notification strategy successfully change behaviors? So kind of applying behavior economics here. Recently, we were working with a coffee chain, and what we were trying to do is to get people just through notifications to think about coffee not only in the morning, but at 4 p.m., which we were targeting those that weren't thinking about it at 4 p.m. And slowly over time, we did actually get these people to think and buy coffee at 4 p.m. Do you have any stories or any secrets for us about how you can actually use this channel to change people's behavior, which I think is really powerful?
Yeah, so I think Albert touched on this, which is the concept of moments. And I think that's incredibly powerful here, because by keying into the moments in the customer journey that dovetail around behaviors that you want to influence, being able to identify those most powerful moments are going to give you kind of the focal points where you can then focus your communications around. And again, looking at the timeliness of push in general, that becomes the best tool really to hit the customer with the relevant communication. So, one thing that we've been kind of looking at is the concept of reducing repeat calls to our care centers. So, we have customers that will call in, they'll get the help they need, some kind of transaction, and they'll hang up the phone, and then 24 hours later, they'll think, oh, well, I wasn't sure if that was correct, or maybe I'm a little confused what the outcome was. Maybe I need to call back and just make sure that, I made the right decision. So then they would call back, and we'd have, 24 and 48-hour repeat calls, in the double-digit percentages, which is obviously not what we wanted to do. So we turn that into a key moment where we can send a push notification. We're actually trialing this right now, which basically not just engages the customer with digital, but also with the brand by saying, hey, we appreciate you calling to care. Hopefully that we're able to take care of your need. If you have any more questions, click here to open up the Verizon app, and then we will link them into the digital assistant, which would then be able to provide personalized solutions based on whatever it is that they need.
Yeah, it's interesting. What we've seen is, because we do in-app audio targeting as well as more standard display, or even some of the notification side, is the immediacy of behaviors visually when they see a notification or an ad. It doesn't really exist in audio, but the recall is stronger. It's like a latency period. So audio, they remember hearing it, and then they show up later. But for the more display formats, they either do it then or they don't do it at all. So we've looked at what that means in terms of how we balance the two as sort of, let's call it media mix options, knowing what behavior is just not going to happen. And again, that gets to that thing of you can't treat audio like you would anything that's in display format, because the human behavior is just not the same. So now we have to plan around what it needs an immediate response, because it's very much timed, and then what can have a latency period because the window of purchase is essentially much longer. I think the other thing we found out is human behavior has very deep-rooted, what I call conversion behaviors. They like to use their go-to shopping app. So part of what notifications can do is, if you're partnered with another one, is get them to rely on, you use a different one or use more, because certain offers now come through that app. So maybe it's not Shopkick, maybe it's another one. So that's the other power that notifications do. It's like, well, I gotta be in this lane because these are gonna be the bennies that come with it, versus what I've just kind of stuck to over the years because it was the first one, it was easiest. So I think that's the other thing we're starting to look at, is can we move people over to a different conversion path?
I think notifications are really useful for apps that really have a customer journey as like the heart of the app. So for example, I feel like on the one hand, if it's a not personalized notifications, you have to be very careful of how often you're sending it, because otherwise you may have negative results like app uninstalls. An email, you don't want to send necessarily too many emails, or an email at each step of a process, because that's a lot of email. You might get unsubscribes or people ignoring your emails over time. But with notifications, if it's personalized, to give the example, currently we're in the middle of fantasy football season here. So if you look at your, say, CBS or ESPN apps, you're going to get notifications of, make sure you set your fantasy lineups. Your waiver wire is starting. There's a deadline for this tonight, or the kickoff for your first game is happening. All these things are absolutely necessary for the top premier apps in that business, using push notification, not email, to lead customers through that journey, because that's how you really reach and have the immediate, okay, here's news that I need to act on right now.
Thank you. And I think we're almost out of time, so I want to make sure we do save some time in case someone has questions out there. Is there any questions?
I have one question about push notifications. Is there ever a negative time to send push? For example, if someone's watching a sports game and they're like DVR and like they're 5 minutes behind, and all of a sudden you get a push notification on who won. Yeah. Not that that's happened to me, but that sort of thing. Is there any way to monitor for that sort of thing?
Yeah. So for example, our product has a no spoiler mode. In the product, just internationally around the world, some people are in countries where they really can't watch it live. They wake up and they want to watch it as if it was live, but it's on demand. If they're in that situation, or if they have no spoiler mode on, if we have to the point where we are sending notifications of like, here's the end result of something, I'd want to match that against their no spoiler mode setting, to not, even though you could read about it online, like the result has happened, we don't want to spoil that for someone. So I think you'll find in a lot of sport apps, there are those settings. There's actually very distinct settings in sports apps of exactly what you're opting into in the push notification preference center. Start times, halftime result, final result, all these things are usually specific settings you opt into, because the companies know, they need to know what user wants for situations like that.
Yeah, I would say also middle of the night. Definitely not a good time to send a push notification. That might seem like a no-brainer, but something to consider who's used to email CRM, right? You could send an email in the middle of the night, doesn't disturb anyone, but you send a push and you might end up waking people up. One thing to consider too with push is a lot of platforms provide the ability to select custom sounds. So you can even implement silent push, or different pre-made sounds that you've designed, just to add an additional level of importance or less importance to the push itself.
Yeah, and I would probably say, and I hate to use the term programmatically, but I think if you work with the right partners, they have data on not only prime usage time, but if you're trying to drive retail foot traffic, prime foot traffic time, even if they're bringing in location analytics, so you can find out the optimal window to get them in, which backs into the lead time of when you want to notify them, which obviously that constrains you to a certain hours of the day. So I think if you lose a little bit of data science to be smart about it and just be precise on when someone's going to take an action, then you land far in the safe zone of sort of interrupting or disturbing people. I think the other thing is if the approach is location aware, then there's certain locations that fall out of bounds. And then you only focus on the engagement, point of engagement, where a next step can take place.
Got it. Other questions? Just for the record, Albert was not late. He was actually early. Because of the program modification, we ended up starting early. So our apologies to Albert.
Thank you.
Thank you all very much. Great panel.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Erin. Well, I hope this has been useful for